The FBI Academy opened in Quantico, Virginia in 1972, and at that time they had what they called instructional units. And the behavioral science unit was one of those instructional units. And they had 3 or 4 topics that they taught. They taught criminology, psychology, sociology in the behavioral science unit. And then gradually they expanded the amount of materials and the types of materials they taught, and it came to include the investigation of violent crime. And how it came to evolve into what we do today, profiling, is that one of the instructors, or 2 of the instructors, were talking about the various types of personality disorders. And one of the personality disorders they discussed was the psychopath, or the antisocial personality disorder. We could still call him the psychopath. The psychopath. And he started talking about the characteristics and traits of the psychopath. And one of the students said, "My gosh, you just described a killer I arrested. If I gave you an unsolved crime, do you believe that you could tell me what type of characteristics and traits that offender might have in an unsolved case?" And that's how profiling began in the behavioral science unit.
A profile of a killer is developed based on the primary work done by local investigators. And most all of those are very adept and accomplished, but they will bring to us the results of their investigation, including all the crime scene material, photographs, the laboratory results based on what they collected at the crime scene and off of the victim. And then we try to concentrate a lot of our energy on determining what kind of a victim this particular person was. What was their lifestyle? What was the likelihood that they would come in contact with someone who was going to be violent based on the way they live their lives?
When you're an investigator, you have a lot of unanswered questions. You see crimes and you say, "I wonder why he did this." You know, you have these kind of questions. And some of these questions have been around since the beginning of law enforcement. Questions like, you know, does the killer return to the scene of the crime? That's one of the oldest ones, you know. And you know, questions like, was the killer in the crowd when the body was found? You know, does the killer go to the funeral? Does the killer ever visit the gravesite? All of these questions that we had, and there's no research, there are no answers. And so we begin to think that we're going to have to do our own research, because these are investigative questions. These are not questions that typically psychology or sociology or criminology ask. These are questions that the investigator asks because he or she wants to know, wants to understand the mind of the criminal better.
Look at him, Starling. Tell me what you see.
Oh, he's a white male. Serial killers tend to hunt within their own ethnic groups. He's not a drifter. He's got his own house somewhere, not an apartment.
Why?
What he does with them takes privacy. He's in his 30s or 40s. He's got real physical strength, combined with an older man's self-control. He's cautious, precise, and he's never impulsive. He'll never stop.
Why not?
He's got a real taste for it now, and he's getting better at his work.
There was research that talked about the killer's homicidal triangle. And the research said that many killers in prison were interviewed, and it was found that they had an interest in fire setting, cruelty to animals or insects, and enuresis, or soiling the clothes later in life. And those 3 things were put together into what they called the homicidal triangle. And that many killers had this homicidal triangle. Well, what we were able to do was to add fantasy, so make it a quadrant, you know. And perhaps fantasy was the most important of all, you know, because fantasy drives the behavior.
I think in our studies and our research and talking to them, really the common commonality features really are, you see it more in their upbringing, in their backgrounds, their early childhood, maybe adolescence, and even into adulthood. Some of the problematic issues that they had to face that probably helped mold them towards the very aggressive behavior they engage in later. And the literature will talk about commonality features like fire setting or bedwetting, enuresis, or cruelty to animals.
Their youths were probably confused or mixed up in some way. There may have been some drug or alcohol abuse, possibly. Certainly some violent behavior, because as we know in profiling, past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. So if you have some of those markers in their past, and you mix in some sort of a dysfunctionality in their present life, you also throw in the opportunity and throw in some innate intelligence, and again, sometimes luck, you may just have an offender who is successful for much longer than law enforcement would like.
In all these cases where we're looking at really, bad behavior, whether it be treason or whether it be murder or whether it be some kind of other violence against children or whatever it is, really bad stuff, you're looking to try and find why. There's always things you can go back and talk to them about, and you can see waypoints there, and you can say, oh yeah, okay, bad background, they were tormented as kids, and then somebody will come along who's a perfect model, they just suddenly, all of a sudden it seems like here's the crime, and so you think, well, there's an exception, here's an exception. How do I fit all this together? And we haven't yet. I think it's not that we're not trying, and maybe one of these days we'll develop good models, but it's still a long way off.
My daughter is Catherine.
Boy, that's smart.
Release her unharmed.
Jesus, that's really smart.
Anywhere
She keeps repeating the name.
And I promise
He
you.
sees Catherine as a person and not just an object. It's harder to tear her up.
Please.
Victims are viewed by killers as objects. I dealt with one offender, again, who wrote to me, and he said, we'll talk about the victims you allege that I killed. And he says, for example, to show you I'm really trying to be of good faith here, I'll give you Lisa on the house. So that's the way he began the discussion of Lisa. He said, if things go well, we can chat about Elsie. Well, you don't chat about a murder victim. You chat about the weather, or you chat about the baseball game, football game, but you don't chat about a murder victim. So in one sense, he's going to give me one on the house, okay, to show good faith. And then on the other hand, we're going to chat about one. So they view the victims as objects.
The murder sometimes is a method of domination and power, and you can't have any more dominating or power and control over someone than to take their life. But if you can do it in such a way that they're not really a person, sometimes it's probably easier for the offender to engage, because they have less meaning. There's no relationship, and they can walk away. They don't have to think of the individual, and they don't, as a sister, or somebody's sister, or somebody's daughter, or somebody's mother. A lot of times it comes from anger at women. A lot of these offenses stem from a tremendous amount of anger, personal anger, that they've maybe had directed towards someone else, and they act out against a stranger.
What is that? Some kind of seed pod?
No, sir. That's a bug cocoon. There's no way that could get way down in there like that.
Unless somebody shoved it in there.
I like to say, thank God for narcissism, because in many instances, this is what allows law enforcement to cause those individuals to step forward. they can't resist the temptation of claiming credit for what they've done in one way or another. Telephone calls or communication with the media, or even, if you will, leaving signatures at crime scenes, intentional or unintentional, sometimes intentionally.
It's a challenge for them to challenge law enforcement, I think, sometimes. Some serial offenders want to, maybe they want that feature found and paid attention to, and it's one way that they can, so they know that they're still out there. I'll do this certain thing, and I'll do it the same way in each case. So now you know you've got a serial guy, and I'm the worst of the worst. I've killed more people than than anyone else, and some of them feel that way about it.
Many offenders will, as a result of their need-driven behavior, there's a part of their psychosexual makeup that dictates that they take something or maybe leave something from or behind at the scene, depending what's going on. Sometimes it's both. And whether it's a trophy or some sort of a memento of the scene itself that they want to take with them. It could be a body part. It could be something very personal to the victim. It could be a photograph the offender takes from the house. It could be a photograph he takes of the victim before he leaves. It could be something left behind in terms of any sort of DNA type of material that this person wants to contribute to the crime scene. Now, the smarter ones know that's how you can get caught, and they wouldn't necessarily want to leave that behind. But others can leave other artifacts behind that somehow represent what it is they have done. Now, some choose not necessarily to leave anything at the crime scene itself, but perhaps to use the media or even the internet as some means of, in fact, maintaining the longevity of the particular crime they committed. So they may kill someone or rape someone one night, then the next thing you know, they're on some blog site, or they're sending letters anonymously, of course, with some made-up pseudonym that they've now attributed to themselves to the media, and they've now further enhanced what they've done at the crime by, in fact, this notification that here, I'm back, I've been successful again, I'm long gone, you're never going to find me, coppers, and they go on to the next crime after that.
Has the FBI learned something? The police around here don't seem to have the first clue. I mean, have you got like a description from your friends, anything like that?
Buffalo Bill was used as a mainstay in the character of Hannibal Lecter. But again, he was on the rare side of who you run into, the type of crime you run into, and his persona was magnified for dramatic purposes. There are people like him out there, but again, there's so few of those. Difficulties with women in sexual homicides and rape, very common. They don't take that to the extreme that we see where you take their skin, as was in the story. But a problem dealing with women is a mainstay of what a lot of these crimes are about.
The character in that movie was a compilation of a number of different serial offenders, renowned serial offenders over the years. Ed Gein was one, and then Ed Gein was a gentleman who lived out in Wisconsin back in the 50s. He was robbing graves, and he was a taxidermist, and he would dismember bodies and make body parts and mobiles, and it was pretty bad. And he was believed to have killed a few people, and so they took that feature of Ed Gein, and that was part of Buffalo Bill's personality. Okay, and then the aspect of the movie that involved the pit, where the young girl was kept in this pit, was really taken from another serial offender out of Pennsylvania, a gentleman named Heidnik, who was a sadistic type of offender. He kept his victims in a pit and would feed them dog food or cat food and stuff like that. Would treat them very poorly. And then the other aspect, if you recall, and I'm sure you do, of the movie where he had his arm was injured and he was asking for assistance to get a couch, I believe it was, on the back of a truck, and certainly, you know, it was to allay the concerns of someone coming by. They saw a guy with a cast or whatever. That was a concept that was taken directly from Ted Bundy, who was known to have employed that kind of technique to gain access to one of his victims. So what they did for the movie was they took a compilation of a number of very horrendous offenders and the features and how they engaged their victims and rolled them into one bad guy, Buffalo Bill.
Do you know why he's called Buffalo Bill? Please tell me. The newspapers won't say.
Well, it started as a bad joke in Kansas City homicide. They said, this one likes to skin his humps.
Why do you think he removes their skins, Agent Starling? Throw me with your acumen.
It excites him. Most serial killers keep some sort of trophies from their victims.
I didn't.
No. No, you ate yours.
Hannibal Lecter's an interesting character. Of course, he's a made-for-movie character, and so he is going to be on the outer parameters of what real offenders do. And in fact, the Hannibal Lecter, as I understand it, was a composite of several offenders using just the most severe and tantalizing pieces of their character and their crimes. Hannibal Lecter would not be considered a typical offender. There are serial murderers that are as bright as Hannibal Lecter and who are as clever in their crime scenes as he was, and because of that, they're extremely difficult to catch. And then when you try to sit down and interview them, they've thought about this interview for years. If something goes wrong, how do I handle the situation? What do I say? Do I try to fool with them or mislead them? We have some people in crime, this violent crime, that are extremely bright and who study us, who study the profilers, who study the investigators, and try to find ways to manipulate the crime, to manipulate the scene so it looks different than it is.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
When you say you can't make this up, you know, sometimes you can't. People really do a lot of strange things, but I'd say that Hannibal Lecter was probably sort of the ideal bad guy, and was a compilation of a lot of different types. And that's kind of the way it looked, you know, to me. I mean, my problem being inside is that you could pick out the pieces, different types of characters. We've had serial murderers who are very, very smart, like Ted Bundy, you know, are very, very smart. We've had serial murderers who cannibalize their victims. We've had serial murderers who've made overcoats out of their victims. That was Ed Gein, you know, and so he kind of pushes them all together and gets a real sharp, evil guy that appeals to people, and that's what you got. But it's not reality because the evil character is too good.
I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. Bye.